the galaxy had long since forgotten Earth. The once thriving homeworld of humanity, now a barren wasteland, was a tragic relic of a past forgotten by the stars. After the fall of Earth, humanity's survivors had scattered across the farthest reaches of space, joining the scattered remnants of other once proud species. It was in these distant, isolated corners that the last human colony, Argonauta, had thrived. A haven of human ingenuity and resilience, it stood as the last beacon of a forgotten empire, a colony with no place in the galactic orders that had replaced humanity's once predominant role. Among its inhabitants was Captain Elena Stark, a pragmatic yet deeply compassionate leader who had lived through the darkest years of humanity's exile. In Argonauta, humanity had found solace, yet Elena had always sensed the unease that lingered just beneath the surface. The colony had flourished under the protection of the Galactic Alliance, but Elena had always wondered, why? The Alliance had often turned a blind eye to the colony's expansion, allowed human technology to grow unchecked, and permitted the rise of an undercurrent of growing rebellion. The answer came when the signal arrived, a transmission from an unknown source. Elena's communication officers had intercepted it in the early hours of a cold, starry morning, its message simple but urgent, *, the Federation is coming. You are the last hope. *. Confusion swept through the command center as Elena stared at the blinking text on the screen. The Federation, a powerful coalition of alien races, had been the ultimate force that had driven humanity to the brink of extinction. They were ruthless, highly advanced, and merciless in their conquest of the galaxy. They had destroyed Earth, enslaved countless species, and crushed any sign of human resistance across the stars. Elena's heart sank. The Federation's impending arrival could mean only one thing: the last colony of humans would fall just as Earth had, erased from the face of the galaxy. But why had this mysterious transmission singled them out? Why had humanity, once thought to be extinct, been called to be the galaxy's last hope? Unable to ignore the warning, Elena convened a meeting with her senior officers. Among them was Commander Jace Calloway, a war-hardened veteran who had once fought alongside humanity's forces in the failed wars against the Federation. His face was a grim mask, but his sharp eyes betrayed a deep-seated fury that simmered beneath the surface. "We've been living in the shadows for too long," he said, his voice low but resolute. "The Federation will never stop until they've wiped us out completely. We've been in hiding, but it's time we do something more than survive." Elena nodded solemnly. She knew Jace's words were true. The Federation had always seen humanity as a threat, a species capable of changing the balance of power in the galaxy. The truth was, humanity's potential had never been fully realized, and those who had survived had built something extraordinary here on Argonauta. This colony wasn't just a refuge, it was a beacon of hope, a symbol of humanity's indomitable spirit. "I won't lie to you," Elena began, looking at her officers with determination. "The Federation is coming, and they won't stop until we're gone. But I'm not about to let them take us without a fight. We have something they don't expect, a human resolve that's been tested in the crucible of loss. If we're going to change the fate of the galaxy, it has to start here, with us." Jace's gaze softened, and a flicker of hope sparked in his eyes. "We might be small, but we have the advantage of being underestimated. That's something we can use." Elena's mind raced as she considered their options. The Federation's fleets were vast, but they were also bureaucratic, overconfident, and complacent. They had never faced humanity's grit, innovation, and cunning in battle. It would take everything they had, their ingenuity, their courage, and most importantly, their unity, to stand a chance against the Federation's overwhelming might. As she stared out of the command center's viewport at the distant stars, Elena's resolve hardened. This was no longer just about survival. It was about showing the universe that humanity had not been extinguished. It was about proving that the last human colony wasn't just a relic, it was the spark that would set the galaxy on fire. The rebellion had begun. The days following the mysterious transmission were filled with a palpable sense of urgency. Word of the Federation's impending arrival spread quickly across Argonauta, and what had once been a small group of dissidents became a full-fledged movement. Elena's decision to take a stand had reignited something within the people, a fire long extinguished by centuries of exile. They were no longer just survivors, they were fighters, ready to defend their home and their legacy. In the heart of the colony's capital, a series of war councils were held to strategize the defense of Argonauta. Elena and her officers worked tirelessly, drawing up battle plans and training the colony's civilians in combat techniques. Though they had no standing military force, Argonauta had become a hub of human ingenuity, and many of its citizens were skilled in mechanics, engineering, and piloting. It wasn't long before the entire colony was working around the clock to prepare for the inevitable conflict. "We need to strike first," said Commander Calloway during one of the meetings. His eyes were sharp, his voice firm. "The Federation will underestimate us, but if we can hit them hard enough at their weakest points, we might just create an opening. We don't have the luxury of waiting." Elena thought about this carefully. The Federation had vast fleets, advanced weaponry, and decades of military strategy honed in battle, but they had one key weakness: arrogance. They believed humanity was a forgotten relic, too small and insignificant to pose a serious threat. They had no idea what the humans on Argonauta were capable of. "We need to make them think we're weak," Elena said, her voice cold and calculating. "Let them underestimate us. Let them come to us with their usual arrogance. And then, when they least expect it, we strike." Jace nodded, impressed by her cunning. "I'll start coordinating with the engineers. We'll need new weapons, new tactics. It'll be an uphill battle, but if anyone can pull this off, it's us." As preparations continued, Elena found herself facing a new challenge. While the majority of Argonauta's citizens rallied behind her, there were still those who doubted the wisdom of standing up to the Federation. Some believed that their only chance of survival was to hide, to remain unnoticed until the Federation lost interest. Others feared that any resistance would only provoke the full wrath of the Federation, sealing their fate. One such individual was Dr. Lydia Core, the colony's chief scientist and an expert in advanced propulsion systems. She was brilliant, but her fear of confrontation often kept her from taking risks. One evening, as Elena passed through the medical facility, Lydia caught her attention. "Elena," Lydia said hesitantly, her eyes filled with concern. "I've been running the numbers. We don't stand a chance against the Federation. Our technology is outdated. Our fleet is small. We can't defeat them, not like this." Elena paused, considering the scientist's words. It was true, the Federation's superiority in both technology and numbers was staggering. But in Lydia's voice, there was something else, a subtle hint of resignation, as if she had already given up on the possibility of victory. "We may not have the firepower to face them head-on," Elena replied, her voice soft but resolute. "But we have something far more valuable, the will to fight. And the Federation doesn't know what that looks like." Lydia hesitated, then looked away. "I wish I could believe that." "I don't need you to believe it," Elena said, placing a hand on Lydia's shoulder. "I just need you to help us make it happen." As the days passed, the colony's war effort took shape. New weapons were developed using scavenged technology, and the shipyards began to churn out makeshift warships capable of striking with speed and precision. Meanwhile, Elena worked tirelessly to rally her people, reminding them that they were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their place in the galaxy, for their future, for humanity's legacy. But even as the rebellion grew stronger, Elena knew they could not succeed alone. Argonauta may have been the last bastion of humanity, but they would need allies if they were to stand a chance against the Federation. And so, she set her sights on the galaxy beyond the colony, on the scattered remnants of other species who had suffered under the Federation's rule. If they could forge alliances, they might have a fighting chance. In secret, Elena sent out messages, encrypted and hidden deep within the Galactic network, calling for aid from anyone who would listen. The fate of the universe depended on it. If they could unite, they might turn the tide in the Federation's war for domination. But time was running out. The Federation's fleets were drawing closer, and their first wave would be upon Argonauta within weeks. The question was no longer whether they would survive, but how much of the galaxy they could save. The days blurred into a frenzied rush of preparation, the once quiet colony now a beehive of activity. Every shipyard hummed with the sound of welding and engineering as the makeshift warships began to take shape. Every factory was repurposed for the production of weapons, laser rifles, pulse cannons, and missile pods. Civilian pilots, previously content to navigate the peaceful stretches of space, were being trained in combat maneuvers. No one had the luxury of sleep, but they pushed forward relentlessly. The Federation's fleets were closing in fast, and the clock was ticking. Captain Elena Stark spent long hours in the command center, poring over data feeds, analyzing the Federation's movements, and coordinating with her officers. Her mind never ceased to churn. Every plan she devised was tempered by the reality that, in their current state, Argonauta stood little chance against the might of the Federation's armada. Still, Elena had no intention of surrendering. The heart of the rebellion had taken root in the colony's very soul. Her people were resolute in their resolve. If they were to fall, they would make the Federation pay a steep price. "Commander Calloway," Elena said one evening, her voice calm yet unwavering. "What's our status on the Alliance requests?" Calloway leaned over the console, his face etched with fatigue but resolute. "We've sent out every signal we can. Some of the smaller resistance cells have acknowledged us, but they're scattered across the galaxy. No one's going to be able to get here in time, not before the Federation arrives. It's too risky." Elena nodded, deep in thought. She had known this was a possibility, but it was a bitter pill to swallow. In her heart, she had hoped for a miracle, an unexpected force to rise up and tip the balance of power in their favor. But the Federation's control was all-encompassing, and the galaxy was filled with fear, not unity. "Then we fight with what we have," Elena declared, her eyes steely. "We may be small, but we have something they don't, human ingenuity. And if we play our cards right, we can make them fear us." In the coming days, Elena and her senior officers worked out a daring plan to strike at the heart of the Federation's fleet before it could properly organize its forces. Their only hope was to cripple their enemy's command structure early and create chaos within the Federation's ranks. "We'll go after their flagship," Jay said, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "If we can destroy the leadership, it'll throw their entire operation into disarray. Without their command structure, they won't be able to mount an effective assault." It was a risky gambit. The Federation flagship, the Hegemony, was an enormous warship, bristling with weapons and heavily guarded. It was the symbol of the Federation's dominance, a floating fortress that commanded entire fleets. Yet, Elena saw no other way. If they were to survive, they would need to take the Federation's most prized asset and turn it against them. The plan was set into motion immediately. Ships were refitted for the mission, with cloaking technology to slip past Federation radar and surprise their enemies. A team of elite soldiers and engineers would board the flagship, disabling its defenses long enough for a devastating strike. Meanwhile, Elena took on the role of command. She would lead the charge, piloting one of the newly designed warships herself. There was no hesitation in her actions. If this mission succeeded, it could tip the scales in humanity's favor, or it would be their final stand. Elena knew that if she faltered now, her people would lose faith. As the days wore on, the fleet began to assemble in the outer orbit of Argonauta. Ships filled with every scrap of weaponry the colony had been able to muster took formation under the watchful eye of Elena and her command staff. The Federation fleet was still days away, but the human forces were ready. It was now or never. In the final hours before the mission, Elena walked through the hangar bay, her gaze taking in the crew members and soldiers who would accompany her. Their faces were a mix of fear, determination, and hope. They had never fought a battle like this before. But what the Federation didn't know was that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their weapons or ships, it was their spirit. Jace approached her as she stood before the sleek warship that would be her vessel for the operation. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly, his gaze shifting to the ship. Elena met his gaze. "If we don't stop them here, we'll be wiped out. This is our only shot. Then let's give them hell." She smiled faintly, a glimmer of something fierce in her eyes. For humanity. And with that, the fleet moved into position. The time for hiding was over. Argonauta, the last human colony, was about to make its mark on the galaxy. The fleet was ready. As Elena's warship, the Resolute, lifted off from the surface of Argonauta, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on her. This wasn't just another skirmish or another fight for survival. This was humanity's last stand, the final spark that could ignite a rebellion across the galaxy, or snuff out humanity's legacy forever. The fleet of mismatched ships, scrappy vessels cobbled together from the remnants of old human technology and salvaged alien designs, moved into position, cloaked by the best stealth systems Argonauta's engineers could create. They would need every advantage if they were to slip past the Federation's formidable defenses unnoticed. Elena stood at the helm of the Resolute, flanked by her closest officers. Commander Jace Calloway stood behind her, his arms crossed, eyes focused on the starfield ahead. The tension in the air was palpable. There was no room for error. "We're entering Federation-controlled space," Elena said, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "Once we're in range of their fleet, we'll need to move fast. We can't afford to be spotted. The success of this mission depends on complete surprise." "Understood, Captain," Jace replied, his tone a quiet confidence. The rest of the fleet followed in tight formation, the ship's cloaking devices humming as they approached the Federation's flagship, the Hegemony. It loomed in the distance, a colossal vessel bristling with weapons, its dark metallic surface glistening ominously. Dozens of smaller Federation warships circled around it like a protective shield, creating an impenetrable wall. Elena's hand gripped the controls tightly, her knuckles white. It was a long shot, an attack on the heart of the Federation's fleet, but it was the only shot they had. "We're in position," reported Lieutenant Rosetta, the communications officer. "Cloaking systems holding steady. They haven't detected us." "Good," Elena said, her voice low. "Stay on course. Jace, prepare your team. We move when I give the word." Inside the Resolute, the tension was building. Elena glanced over at her tactical officer, Lieutenant Marcus, who was overseeing the targeting systems. His eyes were locked on the readouts, his fingers flying over the console with practiced precision. "The Hegemony is in range," Marcus reported. "We've got about 5 minutes before we reach their perimeter." Elena nodded. "Once we're in, we'll make a direct assault on the bridge. We'll disable their weapons systems, then take control of the ship's central core. We need to give their command structure a reason to panic. The Federation thrives on order. If we break their chain of command, they'll implode." Jace was already gathering his team, preparing for the daring mission to board the Hegemony. His squad of elite soldiers had trained relentlessly for this moment, knowing that the outcome would determine the fate of the colony, and perhaps the entire galaxy. Elena couldn't help but admire their bravery. They were all risking everything for a cause greater than themselves. It reminded her of Earth's early pioneers, the ones who had believed in the impossible and fought for what they knew was right. Humanity had always defied expectations, and today, they would do so again. "We're going in," Elena said, her voice commanding. "Move fast. Take them by surprise. And remember, this is for all of humanity." The fleet surged forward, closing in on the Federation flagship. The tension was unbearable. Every second felt like an eternity. As they neared the perimeter of the enemy's defenses, Elena's heart raced. This was the moment of truth. Without warning, the cloaking field flickered as the fleet broke through the invisible barrier surrounding the flagship. It was now or never. "Brace for impact," Elena ordered. The battle began in a flurry of blinding light and violent energy. The Federation's outer defense perimeter had been breached, but the Federation's response was swift. Automated turrets and fighters emerged from the Hegemony, launching a barrage of laser fire toward the advancing fleet. Elena's ship rocked under the initial assault, but the stealth technology had given them a critical advantage, at least for a moment. Their ships were fast, agile, and able to dodge most of the incoming fire. The Resolute darted forward, weaving through the Federation's defenses with precision, as Elena's heart pounded in her chest. Enemy fighters closing in. Jace's voice came through the comms. "We've got incoming, fast." "We've got them," Elena shouted back. "Disrupt their targeting systems. They won't know what hit them." The ship's weapon systems roared to life as Elena and her crew engaged the Federation's forces head-on. The battle was chaotic, each move calculated to throw the enemy into disarray. The Resolute weaved through fire, its weaponry cutting through the Federation's forces with deadly accuracy. Meanwhile, Jace's team, aboard their specialized assault shuttle, breached the hull of the Hegemony and infiltrated the flagship. As they stormed through the airlocks, blasters in hand, they encountered fierce resistance from the Federation's elite guards. They fought with everything they had, taking down enemy soldiers with precision and discipline. "The bridge is ahead," Jace yelled, his voice strained. "Push forward, don't stop until we take control." But as they approached the bridge, something unexpected happened. An alarm blared through the halls of the Hegemony, followed by a chilling voice over the intercom. Asterisk intruders detected. All security forces, report to the bridge, asterisk. Elena's breath caught. They had been discovered. The Federation was no longer underestimating them, it had begun to realize that humanity was capable of more than just survival. Now, the true battle had begun. The atmosphere inside the Hegemony was thick with tension. Jace and his team had fought their way through the flagship's maze-like corridors, leaving a trail of destruction behind them. But with every step they took, the resistance grew fiercer. The Federation's elite forces were everywhere now, flooding the hallways in waves, determined to prevent the humans from reaching their goal. "We've got company," shouted Sergeant Kim, one of Jace's squad members, as a volley of blaster fire rang out from a nearby corridor. Jace ducked behind a metal pillar, his rifle raised and ready. "Take cover and return fire. Push forward." The squad's movement became a deadly dance: advance, take cover, fire, and repeat. They were making progress, but the further they pushed into the heart of the Hegemony, the more entrenched the Federation's defenses became. It was clear they knew exactly where the humans were headed, and they were preparing for a full-on counterattack. "Get to the bridge, now!" Jace yelled, his voice full of urgency. They had no time to waste. Every minute they delayed gave the Federation more time to regroup and launch a counteroffensive. Elena's mind raced as she watched the battle unfold outside the viewports of the Resolute. Their initial assault had punched a hole in the Federation's perimeter, but now they were facing a fierce, coordinated counterattack. Their forces were split, Jace's team fighting to take the bridge while the Resolute and the rest of the fleet continued to hold off the Federation's smaller ships. The pressure was mounting. "Elena!" Marcus, her tactical officer, shouted from his station. "We've got a new problem, asterisk the Hegemony asterisk is powering up its main cannons. They're targeting us. What's the status on our shields?" Elena demanded, her voice steely. "Recharging, but we're not going to be able to take a direct hit from their main cannon," Marcus replied, his fingers flying over the controls. The Federation flagship was preparing to fire. Elena's eyes narrowed as she studied the ship's movements. She couldn't let them target her ship, not when Jace's team was so close to achieving their objective. "We have one chance," Elena said, her mind working rapidly. "Initiate evasive maneuvers. Split the fleet into two groups, one to draw their fire, the other to provide cover for Jace's team. We'll give them the opening they need." Her crew immediately sprang into action, executing the maneuver with precision. Ships darted in all directions, creating a web of movement that would confuse the Federation's targeting systems. Elena knew they couldn't sustain this tactic for long, but it would buy Jace's team precious time. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Hegemony, Jace and his squad were closing in on their objective. The Federation had realized the humans' intent, and they had thrown everything they had into defending the heart of the flagship. But the soldiers were determined, each one willing to fight until their last breath to secure humanity's future. "We're almost there," Jace shouted, pushing his squad forward, his heart pounding. They had lost 2 men already, Sergeant Kim and Corporal Lawson, but there was no turning back. The mission had to succeed, no matter the cost. The blast doors to the bridge loomed ahead, but they were reinforced with Federation tech that could withstand even the most powerful weapons. Jace's team was getting close, but the door was the final obstacle. "Explosives," shouted Lieutenant Harper. "Get a charge on the door." Jace nodded. The explosives were set, and with a deafening explosion, the door was blown off its hinges, sending sparks flying. The squad surged forward, weapons raised and ready. They stormed the bridge with ruthless precision, taking down the remaining guards in seconds. Inside the control room, the Federation officers were scrambling, their faces twisted in shock and anger. The humans had breached the unbreachable, and now they were taking control. "Elena, we're on the bridge." Jace's voice came through the comms. "We've secured the area, but they'll be sending reinforcements soon. We need to power down the main weapons system, now." "Hold your position," Elena's voice crackled through the comm. "We're preparing for the next phase. We'll make sure no reinforcements get through." Outside the flagship, the battle raged on. The Federation was attempting to regroup, but their command structure had been fractured. With their most critical officers and their flagship's main weapons offline, the Federation's response was slow and disorganized. Their ships, once so coordinated, were now easy targets for the human fleet. Elena's mind raced. This was the moment. Jace's team had secured the bridge, but they had to hold it long enough for the rest of the plan to unfold. She glanced at her crew, her eyes steely with determination. "Marcus, prepare the fleet for a full offensive. Once we have the hegemony under control, we'll use it as a weapon. We're going to take out their remaining fleet and send a message they'll never forget." She turned back to the viewport. The Federation had underestimated humanity for far too long. Now, it was time to show them just what they were up against. The war was tipping in humanity's favor. On the bridge of the Resolute, Elena could feel the weight of their victory in the air. Her crew had executed their plans flawlessly, the fleet in full motion and their targets locked. The Federation, once so confident in their superiority, was reeling. The hegemony had been crippled, and its remaining forces were scattered and disorganized. The Federation was beginning to realize the impossible had happened. The little humans from a backwater world had turned the tide of war. "Captain, the Resolute is in position," Marcus said, his voice focused, yet tinged with disbelief. "We're ready to fire on their remaining fleet." Elena's gaze was fixed on the vast expanse of space, where the Federation's ships were beginning to retreat. But they weren't getting away. Not on her watch. She knew this was their one chance to end the war once and for all. "Elena," Jace's voice crackled over the comm, "the Federation command is in disarray. We've disabled their main weapons systems and locked down the bridge, but they're sending reinforcements. It won't be long before they attempt to regain control. We need to act fast." Elena's mind worked at lightning speed. She knew what had to be done. "Prepare to fire everything we've got. We're going to make sure they never threaten us again." Across the battlefield, the Resolute and the rest of the human fleet unleashed their full firepower. The Federation's smaller ships, once a threat to the colony, were now sitting ducks. The human fleet tore through their defenses like a hot knife through butter. Plasma beams and laser blasts lit up the void of space as the Federation ships began to explode one by one. But even as they fought to secure their victory, Elena knew they weren't out of danger yet. The Federation's flagship had been crippled, but it wasn't destroyed. The remaining ships were pulling back, regrouping for a final assault. She could sense the desperation in their movements. The Federation was trying to salvage whatever they could, but their strategy was flawed. "Jace, we need to disable their last line of defense." "They're trying to regroup at the outer station," Elena said, her voice calm yet urgent. "Can you take out the station's power grid?" Jace's response was quick. "We've already planted explosives on the power cores. If we detonate them now, it'll take out their entire station and cripple their remaining fleet." "Do it," Elena ordered. "We finish this now." Inside the hegemony, Jace's team worked with relentless precision. The explosives had been placed strategically around the station's power cores. Now, as the last Federation reinforcements gathered at the station, Jace knew this would be the final push that would turn the tide in humanity's favor. Ready to detonate in 5, 4, 3, Jace's voice was steady despite the chaos around him. He punched in the command. The power cores erupted with a thunderous explosion. The station shuddered violently as shockwaves rippled out through the surrounding ships. The Federation fleet, caught in the blast radius, was torn apart. One by one, their ships were disabled, their weapons systems fried, and their hulls cracked open. The Federation's last line of defense had been obliterated. Elena watched as the Federation's remaining forces scattered, their ships spinning out of control. The battle was over. "We've done it," Marcus whispered, the disbelief in his voice clear. "They're retreating. They're broken." Elena allowed herself a brief moment of relief. For the first time since the invasion had begun, humanity had seized the upper hand. But even as she watched the Federation ships retreating into the darkness of space, her mind never stopped working. She knew this wasn't just about defeating the Federation. This was about sending a message to every empire, every power, that had ever underestimated humanity. The galaxy had seen what they were capable of, and it would never forget. "Now we take the galaxy," Elena said, her voice low and commanding. "We've shown them what happens when you underestimate a determined human. We'll make sure they know that Earth, and every human colony, will never kneel again." The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The silence after the battle was overwhelming. The Resolute drifted in the emptiness of space, surrounded by the wreckage of the Federation's fleet. The Federation's flagship, the Hegemony, was a hulking ruin, drifting aimlessly as the once proud symbol of their power had been reduced to scrap. The battle was over, but the war's consequences were just beginning to unfold. The galaxy had been changed forever. Elena stood at the helm, staring out at the wreckage through the viewports. Her crew, silent but filled with the weight of what they'd just accomplished, worked around her to assess the damage, confirm their victory, and strategize their next move. The Federation had been broken, but it had not been completely destroyed. There would still be pockets of resistance, remnants of power that refused to accept the new order. "We've won, Elena," Marcus said, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "We did what no one thought was possible. Humanity's rise is unstoppable now." Elena's gaze didn't waver from the stars. "This was just the beginning. The Federation underestimated us for too long. Now, they know that humanity will fight for its future, no matter the cost." The transmission came through loud and clear, Jace's voice, crackling with excitement and exhaustion. "We've secured the Hegemony's core. Their command center is completely disabled. It's over, Captain. The remaining Federation forces are retreating beyond the outer rim. They can't regroup, not now." A wave of relief washed over Elena. They had done the impossible. A tiny colony, once seen as insignificant, had now turned the tide of galactic history. The Federation, once the oppressive force in the galaxy, had been humbled, its plans thwarted by the ingenuity and sheer willpower of a species that had only recently been considered little more than prey. As the Federation's forces limped away, Elena knew that the victory was not just theirs, it was the victory of every human colony that had ever been oppressed, ignored, or cast aside by the galactic powers. And it was only the beginning. "Begin broadcasting," Elena said to Rosetta, the communications officer. "We're going to send a message." As the fleet's message rippled through the void, it was not just a victory signal. It was a declaration. The human race had stepped out of the shadows and into the galaxy's spotlight. The transmission echoed through the void, reaching out to every corner of the galaxy. "We are humanity," Elena's voice rang out over the comms. "Once, we were small. Once, we were weak. But we are no longer those things. We are the survivors. We are the ones who rise from nothing, who fight with ingenuity, determination, and the will to protect what we love. We have shown the galaxy what we are capable of. No longer will we bow to tyranny. No longer will we be silenced. The transmission continued, reaching every corner of the galaxy, every race and empire that had ever doubted humanity's strength. The message was clear. The Federation had made its mistake, and now, the entire galaxy would know that Earth and its colonies were a force to be reckoned with. As Elena stood in the quiet aftermath of the battle, her thoughts turned to what would come next. She knew that the path ahead would not be easy. The Federation was broken, but it would not go quietly. There would be factions that would rise to challenge humanity's newfound power. But she had no doubt that Earth, and humanity, was ready for whatever came next. Elena, Jace said over the comm, his voice full of both pride and weariness, we've secured the hegemony and its databanks. There's more to uncover, more to understand about the Federation's plans and what they were really after. We're going to need every bit of information to guide our next steps. Elena nodded. There was no time to rest. The victory was theirs, but the galaxy was vast, and new challenges would arise. But humanity was no longer afraid. They were no longer a footnote in the galactic history, they had written their own story, and that story was just beginning. We'll rebuild, Elena said, a sense of finality in her voice. We'll take what we've learned and ensure that this never happens again. We'll make a new galaxy, a galaxy where humanity stands proud and free. This is just the beginning. As the Resolute and the fleet began their journey to secure their position in the galaxy, Elena could see it clearly, the dawn of a new era. The Federation had underestimated them once, but they would never make that mistake again. And humanity, with its resourcefulness and unyielding spirit, was ready to face whatever the future held. The stars above them glimmered brightly as if acknowledging humanity's triumph. This was the moment when everything changed. And humanity was here to stay.